Good evening, everyone. That looks like that might have behaved itself. Let's balance that precariously over there and do a little bit of housekeeping because that's always cool. That's that one housekeeping. Let's do this one and then we can see where we're up to because life's good, isn't it? Of course it is. There we are. Now then, let's find the correct page on there. Excellent. Excellent. There we are. And then I can pay attention to what's happening. There we are. Excellent. There. Hi, Connie. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Yes. Right. There we are. Let's just do a little bit of what's going on. Good evening, Imrini. Thank you for joining me this evening. And Connie as well. So we are going to do a little make that is, let me grab my ruler. Let's do it in centimetres because I think you'll understand that better. So it is just under 15 centimetres from here to here. And it is about 30 centimetres in that waist lotion. Why has my phone decided to go off? Well, that's very badly behaved. Let me see where we're up to. Here we are. It's just that then we don't always get all the comments on everywhere. Good evening, Sheila. Hello, Sarah. Thank you very much for loving and sharing. So let's go through some of the bits and pieces that we're going to use and then we'll start and make. So I left a fairly cryptic title deliberately. So I have a mould from a Stamperia City of Venice collection. And I was going to do this in modelling paste light. And you can fill this mould with modelling paste light and let it dry. But be warned, it is really quite deep. And it took probably 3 days in a very warm conservatory for these to dry. And I was a bit impatient and I probably could have left it done with leaving it a bit longer. So they're a bit satty around the edges. So I've recast them in resin because I think we get a better cast. And we're not going to use the big one, but I will use that on another project on its own because it's just beautiful. And I think it deserves centre of age. So what else have I got here? Let me just pull these away so we've come down to the different bits and then we can go through some of these pieces. Because we've got several different bits and pieces here. So the title and the papers come from the Paper Cups collection, this one. I've got some pieces, these 2 pieces, maybe 3 pieces, are from the Ephemera collection, this one, which is cool. Let me just pop all of these together so I don't lose them. The moulds I have shown you, so that's cool. And the remaining bits on here are actually all from walnut rice paper. Let me just fish out what I've got left because you'll see that because I've cut very specifically around the rice paper, I've still got quite a lot left. So we'll do something different with this another time. Okay. And yes, horror of horrors, I did get a pair of scissors out to cut these out because I wanted it very precise. But you don't need to if that's not what you want to do. So let's just pop these pieces over here out of the way. And I haven't got anything primed at the moment, which is highly intentional. I can assure you. And controversially, I'm not going to, I am going to climb. I'm not going to be controversial. Let me just retrieve my texture paste. So I have a texture primer because I'm wanting to use some of the plasters on this, and a textured primer will help it hold in place. So this comes in lots of different sizes, from the 150 mils that you typically have seen, that I've actually used up my first pot of that, and then 500. So I would say for most people, actually, you are absolutely fine with just the most crafters would manage with just the 150 ml primer, and this has got a grittiness to it and a texture, and it will help hold the plaster pieces in place. And I've got a dirty paintbrush, but hey ho, that's also not going to matter. So we're just going to give a layer of the texture, this primer, onto here. I could have used the deep primer, which is texture free and will sink in, but because I'm wanting to use the plasters, this is going to work better this evening. Good evening, Isabel. So there we are. We're just going to, all these things take a little bit of time, and we're just going to wander our way through this project, and it'll take, I think, as long as it takes, because that's just life, isn't it? There we are. There we are. So let's just go all the way around these from here. Hello, Juliana. Welcome. Good evening, Georgina. I don't recognise your name, so I'm assuming this may be the first time you've watched me. So my name is Gill. I am based in the northwest of England, and the only language, to my shame, that I speak is English. I can do good morning and good evening in French, and that's possibly about the limit of my linguistic skills. But most of my mates, because I follow step by step, should be reasonably understandable. If you've got questions, then please feel free to ask away, and I will endeavour to see and answer them, though it's never quite guaranteed. So as you say, this is the texture primer. I'll show you the pot in a minute again, and it definitely has a grittiness to it. There is a coarse texture primer that is even more bumpy than this. Good evening, Elizabeth. Welcome. So there we are. So we'll just carry on, and then we can give this a little bit of a blast dry. We'll prime my resin pieces, because the cast pieces I haven't actually primed, and they could be made from Jovi clay. They could be done from the Pentacolor rapid resin. You know, that you can do them in the modelling paste light, but the mould I've used is quite thick, so it wouldn't be my recommendation. But you do you when it comes to that. There we are. Let's just clear the stuff off that lid and finish off priming this. And as I say, I've deliberately chosen this primer with its texture because of what some of the layers I'm wanting to put on long term, which it definitely, they will stick better to those. So there we are. We have a texture onto there, and let me just pop that lid properly onto there, because otherwise we'll have a pickle. That's now lidded, and we'll stick that over to the side. And these, and I only have 2 resin pieces. I know, what was I thinking? But hey ho, we've got lots of other steps along the way to do. So I deliberately haven't done lots of resin pieces because I didn't think this project needed it. So I'm just going to give these resin pieces a cheeky haircut. You could take a file to them, and that's just some overpour from me casting them. There we are. So we'll just get rid of that. Chop off those. The very thin edges will cut perfectly well with a pair of scissors, or you can take a nail file to them, your choice. So I have swapped to Pentacolor Primer Paste Gesso to prime these because I don't particularly want additional texture or thickness onto my resin pieces, because it will disguise or not help with the detail that's in them. And one of these is a clock. That's obviously a dirty paintbrush. Hey ho, never mind. That again is not going to matter long term. There we are. Why did I manage to miss that? And that. There we are. It's nothing like painting to pick up what you're doing. So yeah, I've deliberately not chosen that because I don't particularly wish these to be aged. Now, if I wanted these the resin pieces to have a more textured or aged look on the finished piece, then I could have stuck with the same primer. But sometimes I think it's quite useful to go through the different purposes for different things, and I could have just as easily be using Pentacolor bonding primer for this, because these are plastic pieces. So you use the primer that you have, that's your choice. This resin cast piece has masses of detail, so it's got all of the signs of the zodiac all the way around, which is fine, and it would work quite. There's lots. There are several Stamperia molds that have got zodiac signs in them, but we're not going to be painting it with lots of degrees of difficulty, because I haven't got the patience to pick out each symbol separately. So we're going to do differently, but that's okay. So that can go in there. That's now had a coat of that, and we will lid the primer paste gesso. Pop that securely onto the floor. Grab a wipe, clean my mitts. Good evening, Julie. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, and next week we might well do an art journal page. Why not? Why not? So let's get this dry. I don't want that on the rice papers because that would be a pain. To get this, I've got a few layers to go tonight, which is all very well and good, but you just need to let each layer dry. None of it will take a huge amount of time to dry. We just need to do it, do the layers, and let it happen. And I am using pretty much throughout the new Pentacolor wall decor products. There are several UK stockists now, which will make your life easier if you're in the UK, and obviously hopefully you'll know in your own country who is your local supplier, because that's half the battle, isn't it, with everything. There we are. Let me just give these a wash dry. We've got several layers to go onto these, which is always cool, or not cool as the case may be. I might have left a paint colour not out. Right, I might have to go and retrieve the white. Oh, that's okay. We've got a different white. Could use the white from the wall decor. It might be quicker for me to not use that one. Having let that cool down, I can feel with my hands there's still a degree of moisture in there. That's better. So we're going to have an underlayer of paint, and I've chosen colours that I think work with the collection. So this is dark patina wall paint. It's a beautiful bluey green, aka turquoise. turquoise. There we are. She says, let's find a suitable sized paintbrush, otherwise we might just be here for the day. And we don't really require to be here for the day. So we won't need this everywhere, to be fair, which will help speed the process up a little bit. I don't mind having a mixture of different things coming through. Might be easier to cover it all but we're not actually going to see lots of it. But there we are. By the time we've done our layers, there we are. Let's just get rid of some of that. And I could give this a little spritz of water to help spread it around a little bit. So the wall paints are very concentrated, and so one of the keys to these is to actually just use some water. Helps them move. Not that they're a problem for moving anyway, but it will just make it go. Your paints go. And I don't need an even layer because, as I say, a lot of this is going to ultimately end up covered. I don't know what that was. So on my screen, this is coming over, I think, because of as quite a dark blue, but it's actually definitely not a dark blue. It's definitely more of a turquoise, and it's a rather pretty colour. Right, so let's just pop that on there and see what I've done with the lid. There we are. That's what we've done with the lid. Good evening, Anna. Welcome, 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 welcome. So let's just give that a little bit of a blush dry. Oh, she says, oh, we all need to be going and finding some white paint, but there we are. See, always get paint everywhere. It wouldn't be me if I didn't, would it? Of course it wouldn't. There we are. Let's see what's in my magic box of tricks. Have I got? You'll find the white paint imminently. Let's just continue to try those where I use the gesture. Good evening, Sheila. Hello, Paula. Welcome. So let's just give this a blush dry. I'm not worried about the unevenness of this colour. It's catching in the texture from my white texture primer, and it's quite a nice effect in its own right. So if that's a likely look you like, then it's a great way of adding just some aged effect in a really simple way, because it's just a reflection of the amount of paint versus the amount of water, and the fact that the primer has texture, so it's the paint is pumping around the texture. And we're going to grab a primer, another primer in a minute. Definitely still needs to be a bit dry. Good evening, Isabel. Thank you for joining us this evening. I see a few more people are familiar. We're definitely on a full-on mixed media piece tonight, using Venice City of Arts and the Pentacolor painting medium, because the live is for Pentacolor. Right, excellent. Money. Right. We'll just. So I am going to use the cracking plaster and also the cracking and the ordinary structure plaster. So the cracking plaster has its own primer, and this primer cannot be used interchangeably with the other crackles. It's specifically designed to work with the cracking plaster, so just be aware of that. You will find, I mean, if you're like me, you will find that you will use far more of the plaster Let me just grab, because I've got, okay. There we are. No. Of the plaster, there's part 2 than you will of part 1. So just be aware of that and don't necessarily auto order the 2, because you won't find that you need it. So this is the primer for the cracking plaster, which is a 2-part system. And I sort of have a plan. Well, yeah, I do have a plan. There we are. So we're going to have some areas that are crackled and some areas that are not. Hence the blue undercoat, because then I can have some crackles that are blue underneath. Well, that's the plan anyway. Whether, yeah, I don't mind if they're not coloured either. I can always backfill colour with an antiquing gel. Let's just give this a coat, sort of almost diagonally across the page. There we are. Cool. So let's just wipe that and pop that lid on. Good evening, Stephanie. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, apple. There we are. Let's just pop that onto there. And then I'm going to go and find a white paint, which won't take me very long. I'm a bit bemused as to why it's not obviously on the floor next to me, because it always is on the floor next to me. Wow. Never mind. I know where the other one is. So let me just pick up, because we can't find the white paint. There we are. We'll pick up the wall decor white paint, which comes in an antique white. There we are. So that can sit and dry. Might need to do a bit of a tidy up, but that's also okay. So let me just, so this is the antique white paint, and you can, I can see that it's going to give me a nice proper white. I can be more careful with the centre, which I will top glare anyway, because I'm going to change the colour of that. There we are. So let's just pop that into there, take off the extra paint so that I don't end up with it obliterating all of the texture, all of the detail, intrinsic details that are in the mould. There we are. Let's just get rid of that. So, and then we can pop that off to the side. Right, let's get that lid on there properly, because otherwise it will dry up. I work in a conservatory, so it gets incredibly hot in here on occasions, and that's not a good thing when it comes to your mediums. So let's just give this lot all a blast dry. Try not to put my arms in anything, because that would not be good. And I haven't put my pinny on, so that's an even worse news. So the cracking plaster, cracking plaster primer, I guess it's a mouthful, will go on white or milky and will dry clear. So that's always helpful. Good evening, Sue. Welcome. Get rid of that bit of paint. And then we're just sorting out a background. We haven't got masses of intricate mouldings to deal with, which is also, we do have some stenciling to do. always a trauma, but hey ho. Let's get that dry. And I don't particularly want this the one on the blue board to dry, to bubble as I dry. So hence I'm moving between the different pieces so that they can all get a little bit more, a little bit of a cool down in between. And I watched a lovely on the colour the other day using a product that's very, very similar, and she applied her packing plastic with a brush. And if you want thinner, finer lines, a thin, fine layer of the packing plastic applied with a brush will give you that. If you want a more random, thicker crackle, then applying it with a German spatula or which is one of these, or a palette knife will do the job. Let me just get that. It's getting there. So those two can go over there because they'll continue drying. And let's just add our next layer onto here. She says, covered in bits. So that's always unhelpful. So there we are. And I've had to open a second pot. So I've moved on from my original pot of my cracking plaster to a much bigger pot. So as I say, this is the cracking plaster. This is a 500ml pot, but don't be put off by that. It does come in 150ml pots as well. So, you know, if you're just crafting, then that's all you need. Let me just grab a little bit of a palette knife. And let's just pop this onto here. There we are. And it's just going to act as a plaster where I haven't got the primer, and that's also just fine. You can feel the texture, or I can hear the texture on here. Might want it a little bit thicker than that, because I think it might be a little bit of a trauma. Oh, that's a lumpy bit in there. Let's get rid of that lump. Okay. There we are. But I think you can hear I've got texture on this board, and that is from my texture primer. There we are. Don't need a massively thick layer, but I definitely do want a layer. And like many of these things, I can heat dry it, but sometimes you are definitely better off leaving it to dry naturally. So that is the, let's just smooth that down a little bit. There we are. Doesn't have to be all even. Oh, she says putting that onto a perfectly good piece of rice paper at the side. So let's just smooth that down, pop that into there. And one of the good things with these German ones is that you can get maybe a slightly more smooth surface, maybe not. But anyway, there we are. So you do you with whatever tool you have, because that will work quite nicely. So let's just pop the lid on that cracking plaster, the cracking plaster, and then let's just pick up, as we can, my humongous 1 litre size pot of structure plaster. There we are. That looks like it needs a little bit of a mix, so let's just give it a little bit of a mix. But as I say, you can get this in different sizes. I just, when I was given the samples for from a DT, as a DT person, I know I went through this quite quickly, so which is why I have the big pot. But you definitely don't need to have the big pot. If you're just an ordinary crafter doing an occasional project, then feel free just to have a smaller size, the smaller size that will work for you. Just need to cover that. As I say, I'm not mithered about it being not completely smooth or even, because it is a wall plaster. If you want to get it completely smooth, then you might need better plastering skills than me. I'm not a cake decorator either, but if you are, I suspect you will be better at putting this on than I might be. There we are. But let's say you do what works for you, and try not to get stressed about things, because crafting is meant to be a relaxing hobby. Also, they tell me, no, it is meant to be a relaxing hobby. So I'm aware that I might be going over some of my cracking plaster, and that's also absolutely fine. Don't have a problem with that. So let's pop that into there. Let's just give that very rim of there a little bit of wipe and pop the lid back onto that. So there is no requirement that you absolutely have to have these big pots in any way, shape or form. Right, let us give this a little brush dry, because I can't really add very much onto here until I have the surface dry. And there's no way of short-circuiting this, I'm afraid. It is just part of what you have to do, isn't it? You could just use the structure plaster, let it dry and add a layer of texture over the top. That too will work. I just wanted to add some variation into my background. And I've got that by varying the depth of the cracking plaster I've put on, but I'm also then going to get some texture as well from my crackles. And there it goes. So I can see that it's beginning to go. If I move that out of the way, so up here it's beginning to crackle, and the crackles will vary depending on the thickness of the paste that you've put on. And I think they tend to follow the main line of how you've applied your paste as well. So just be aware of that. So if you want your crackles going this, from left to right rather than up and down, then apply your paste from left to right rather than up and down. It's not entirely vertical or horizontal, but there's definitely a tendency for the crackles to form in the direction that the paste was applied. And you'll be able to see that when it's actually properly dry. So I think some of that paint wasn't fully dry underneath or final, because I've got some paint leaching through. That's just going to add to my effect, but that's my bad for not having let it dry properly rather than the fault of the products. There we are. So we just need to bit by bit work down here. So it is drying now, or beginning to dry. If I move my hand out of the way, you'll be able to see more that's appearing. I definitely think that this crackle gives a better result if it's not particularly force dried. So if you can apply it, walk away, and then and let it do its own thing. But for the purposes of the live, I would definitely will have crackle, but I may not have as much crackle as I would get if I wasn't taking a heat embossing tool to it to force it to dry. I guess in there, so it doesn't take a ridiculous amount of time. So I could use just the decor glue to attach my rice paper elements to. I'm not going to. I'm actually going to pick up my decoupage glue because that will also seal it, and that's my preference. But it wouldn't matter if I didn't do that. I could just use it, the decor glue, to attach my rice paper with. So I'm not going to encourage you to buy extra products that you might not need, or when you've already got ones in your arsenal that might do that will do a similar job, if that makes sense. So I think in the week you'll need to watch out for me doing posting a reel or photo collage of the remaining bits of the rice paper, because and it might end up as 2 different pages, and that's also fine. Oops, that was a bit wet down there. Yeah, I'll lift it up so I can see I've got a nice crackle for me, which will work. And I think it will, I'm surface drying this, so it will continue to do a little bit more cracking over time as it dries from the bottom. But this is going to allow me to have enough of a crackle to show you how it works, but allow me to move on with the project at a reasonable speed. You might not want me to do it at a reasonable speed, but I don't really want to be here at 10 o'clock this evening, which it might be if I was to do it, not be getting out and full drying it. So I've got a run of crackles coming over. I still need to get this bit at the bottom dried and crackled. Trace the crackle. The sides might not be dry, but we'll worry about that. Let's just cover that mess where I lifted it up, because that will matter. There we are. So I put my primer down here, and it's crackled beautifully where I have the primer. There we are. Excellent. That's good. Oh, she says. So let us. So these are pieces of rice paper from the paper collection. There we are. Let's just pop that one there and there to start with. So this is the Pentacolor Decoupage Varnish and glue matte. Now, Sarah, I was thinking exactly that, but wondered if it was me that was the problem. But hey ho, we haven't got as many people online as we often have. I think that the art journal pages might have gone down rather well. But hey ho. So there we are. Let's just line that up and pop that onto there. And let's just line this one up. So a good layer of that underneath. Now I'm going to lift that because that the structure plaster is not dry at that point, ladies. Okay, so I'm just going to have to be moderately careful in those thicker areas how I cover. I don't have an issue with some of it coming into it. It will help blend it through. There we are. Look like the piece is partly in and partly off, with a little bit of that over the top of it. Okay. So we have a second piece that I want to pop here, and I'm aware that this is going to partially overlap the bottom. And I'm popping it up this way because of the scales at the bottom, and I can take that over down the sides. There we are, and we'll pop that over there. There we are. So we're going to pop that there. Let's get the clock up the right way. Okay, good. We're approximately in the right place. It's always helpful, isn't it? There we are. I don't have an issue with that going over there. It's just going to help seal it all in nicely. Oops, there's a big lump of something there. So let's just align that reasonably with that. I don't want it quite at the top. That looks reasonably straight. That's always positive. And I don't have an issue with those two overlapping and being able to see through. That's also just fine in my book. Right, so that can go there. That can go there. That can go there. Let's tackle these two pieces. That can go up, up there. She says, no, it can't. It can go down there because the surface is still wet. Let's just give this a little bit of a clean. There we are. Get rid of the mess because that's always good. So we've got two pieces here, and I have selected, because of the colours as much as anything else, I've got the wall decor paint in light patina. So if I pick up paper, so I think that works quite well, and that works reasonably well. And I've also got some beige that I may or may not use. We will see. We will see. Okay, so I'm going to want to add some colour to some of these pieces as a background. Let me just pick up a nice, reasonably sized brush, and let us mix these up a little bit. So this is a wall decor paint in Azure Sea. Yeah, Azure Sea. There we are. And I actually just want the centre part of this painted. With the Azure. There we are. I've got a plan for the other. There we are. Let's just pop that into there. We don't have lots of layers tonight. Got some, but not masses. There we are. And let's take the light patina. Come here. She says, let's just open that, flip that up. There we are. And there's some light patina. So it's a beautiful, beautiful sea glassy green. And then let's just pop that into the centre of there. There we are. Let's just cover that. Okay. And I think the white is too white. It's too clean, if that makes any sense whatsoever. If it's possible to have a white that's too clean. So this is beige, which is a very soft colour. So I think this will give it a little bit more of a vintagey feel for the rest of it. There we are, rather than it being stark white, because I think the stark white is a bit too white, if that makes for the project. So not masses of colours tonight, and not masses of layers. We will bring out the details in this piece with some waxes when they're dry. We just give, and I'm deliberately not getting rid of that plasticite coat because it helps stop the paint drying out. If it irritates you, feel free to get rid of it. It's not essential there, but for me, it will just help preserve these paints for that bit longer. But I definitely feel that is now sitting more comfortably. Can always add in some white and dry brush if I want to later on, but for now we're rather liking the fact that we're tonally working together. There we are. There we are. So I hope then we'll get the board back and give it another blast dry whilst these are drying. So we're doing it all in layers. Now I obviously think quite a lot about the layers and the order I'm going to do things in when I'm doing a live, just from an efficiency and a live point of view. But you could, you can stop and walk away and do each layer separately and then come back and build it over time. And that's equally fine. Just let everything dry. Go and have a cup of tea, enjoy the weather, take the dog for a walk if you want to. There we are. So those are now looking quite nice. And again, yeah, that's better. So I've got better colour balance there, I think, from those. Okay. So let us give those a blast dry. And also this a blast dry, because I need to have all of this lot dry before I can do anything else. And yeah, you'll be surprised, ladies, so we're not doing lots of antiquing gels today. Right. Let's just give this a bit of blast to get the surface dry. I want to add some stenciling onto here, so I need this layer to be the areas around my rice papers to be properly dry. Yeah. Because otherwise, if I put my stencil over the top, then we're going to have a white couple. If I try and lift it off, it'll just pull the surface of the pieces away. Not that I'm going to use a glue tonight, because I'm not. Get these as dry as we can. Just move the glasses out of harm's way, because that's also a positive feature of life, isn't it? Yeah, let's just get that a bit more dry. Yeah. And I might have set myself, well, I almost certainly have set myself a challenge with the stencil I've chosen and the product I've chosen, because why wouldn't I? Right, eeny meeny, which of the numerous white paste on the floor have I got to hand? So I have chosen this stencil. There we are. Let's just pop that. I'm not going to use the whole of it for reasons that will become clear. So this is called the Loft Spackle. So it's a gloopy but quite thick texture paste. And it's a nice texture base because it is thick. It doesn't creep under the stencils in the way that paints have a habit of doing. It tends to sit into the stencil. Yeah, let's just add a bit more onto there and build up. I'm going to have to shift my bottom and lift myself up. Don't want the words that are in that corner. Okay. Excellent. Okay. This might prove a little bit more of a challenge. Okie dokie. And I want some of that text. So let's just pop that over there. Let's just lift that up. Ooh. So there's some text up there. Yeah, I think that, yeah, I think that will work. So let me just pop that over there so I don't squash what I don't want to squash. We will be adding that. So we've got some extra detail onto there. Let's just pop that over there while I just give this stencil a good clean. Let's pop that onto there. Pop that there. We'll come back to them in a minute. Don't need that. There we are. So I know my title was somewhat cryptic. I didn't want to say exactly what I was doing. So that could have gone on to something different, but hey ho. This is a reasonable amount coming off and through. And I just need to give this a proper clean because I don't have a big bowl of water next to me. And if I don't, all of that detail will stick in there and then we'll have a cream crackered stencil. We're not very careful. There's some quite small areas in that stencil. There we are. Cool. So let's just pop that on the floor because we can. Right. Let's pick that up and give you a little bit of a glass dry. So again, I apologise for the amount of drying, but that's just the way of the world. So the water sparkle has a grey undertone, so it's a different shade. Not bad, not bad. So I now have some of the Walliser Antique and my spray bottle. Because if I don't add a spray bottle, it will just become very heavy, because these have got lots and lots of pigment in them. So this is a similar, essentially the same colour as the wall paint, but it is designed to lift back. Let me just add. That was not, perhaps not quite dry enough. That's okay. Let's just add some of this, break down that. I'm not going to be overly minded about it being all coloured, because that's not the intention. I'm just wanting to add and break some of this down a little bit, so it's not, we're going to be adding some colour onto the texture anyway. There we are. So let's just add some into there. So we're just adding just an extra effect, really, as much as anything else. So we don't need to add more of that, but we are going to give it a little spritz to spread some of that water, these darker areas. Just encouraging it to move about a little bit and run. Here we are. So it's just adding a subtlety to it, and we will be changing it up anyway. Okay, so let's just add some of that. Fingers is good, helps move stuff around. Some of that paste might have been a bit better off left to dry a bit longer, but I'm not looking for perfection. Well, I am, but not pristine perfection. That's why I give this all a good dry, because I can't do another layer on here now with all of that water on there. I might end up needing to dab some of that off. I've got my crackle, I've got my rice papers, I've got my Shropshire plaster, I've got my loft spackle, and it's definitely easier to layer this as you go rather than trying to do everything. So I would rather add a little bit of colour now, and then I can come back and add more if I want to. I'm going to want to lock my stencil back over this to add some more colour over the top. So that means I need to have this a bit drier, certainly where I've got the paste and the stenciling to be able to add. So don't be afraid to add water to your product. As long as your papers are properly sealed, it really won't matter. letting each layer dry between things definitely will make it easier for you. Yeah. Patience is a virtue that I seem not to have tonight. Let's see here. Hi. Good evening, Maxine. I just need to get these dry. So you can see where I've added my scent. So you can see all of the layers. Just do need this to be dry. Patience is a virtue. Yeah. Just talk about it amongst yourself, ladies, just while I carry on trying to get this to dry. Having spritzed it with water. Good evening, Maxine. Welcome. Yeah. Excellent. Now then, let us see if we can manage. Possibly. I might regret this, ladies. I might be better off letting it dry. That might prove slightly traumatic. Let's just line that up. Let's swing that round. Okay. So you are. Okay. So I've added my loft spackle to give me some extra depth to this. I think we're reasonably aligned. We're not completely aligned, I don't think. Right, excellent. Let's just grab a little Pansy tool, and I have somewhere two colours. I think we're going to go with the antique copper. So this is a metallic colour. It's a metallic lazur. Yeah, it's clearly got a blue undertone to it. I haven't contaminated that, I promise you. So let's just pounce off most of that. And then let's just pop this in. Hopefully it'll then set on top of my paste. Pouncing is definitely better than dabbing, but it does take a bit more time. There we are. Because I haven't got much paint on here, I can safely scrubble a little bit. So I'm going for a vintage effect. I'm not going for entirely pristine. If I've got some of the white showing, I'm not worried either. It's almost as if a layer of gilding has been put on and is worn off over time, is the effect that we're going to end up with. So the lazur, the metallic lazurs can be used as a paint. They'll wipe off to give you a shimmer if that's what you want, but they can also be used as a stencil paste, so they're a very, very versatile product. Let's just get the rest of that. Is it going to be perfect? Answer no. Because we're live, it never does go completely perfectly when we're live. We always end up missing some bits. There we are. There we are. Not bad, if I do say so myself. Now this might be a slightly bigger set of challenge, but there we are. Right, let's see if we can lock you vaguely into place. It's going to, there we are. So that will look. So I'll get some of the white, some of the pale blue. So as I say, I'm looking at the effect of as if maybe some of it's well worn off with the passage of time. There we are. So that just adds just another layer of interest. Where's the lid? Okay. So let's just take our I'm going to use my metallic lasur on my Storber as my sponge, as my wax tonight. Okay, don't need very much of it though, but it's going to help bring out all of this amazing detail in this mould. I'll go around the edges. I'll pick the other one up and go around the edges of that. There we are. So if you don't like the idea of a solvent-based wax, your metallic lasers on a dauber with not very much in it are going to give you that effect. And that's helped bring that all together. So there we are. We might now just need some glue. Right, excellent. I'm going to be naughty. That's going to go there. That's going to go there. That's going to go there. Let's hope I haven't lost all of these pieces, or more importantly, where I thought I'd be putting them. That way around. So there we are. Let's just pop that into here. So that is a piece of paper because it comes from the, oh, excuse me. And I'm going to chop that piece off. I don't want the whole of that. So bear with while we just give that a little bit of a haircut. So this is a piece of ephemera. And the ephemera have a sticky backing. Okay. So I'm just going to add that onto the bottom of that because I like that. I'm not going to ink the edges of this because I don't really want to add brown into the project. I could do, but there we go. We might be needing another one. Oh, good evening, Alison. So this is from the paper cut pieces from the collection. There we are. Let's just pop that onto there. Let me see if I can remember how I how I had that. I think the plan was actually comme ça. No, it wasn't. I wanted that over there. Let's pop that around onto there. So I can go there. So this is another one of the ephemera pieces. And then we'll have a little time and we'll see where we're up to. Good evening, Karen. Well, there is a 1. And there's lots of other numbers into here. There we are. Okay. I've got another piece of that ephemera. The paper cuts even to go into there. Linking that. This is another ephemera piece. There are 2 of those. I only got 1 out, but that's fine because that's how the cookie crumbled. I didn't feel it needed another piece. And I'm going to pop that over there. And that's also going to get a cheeky haircut. And we can go over there. Now, what did I do with that little piece? So I've got another piece here that I could add in as a link. I'm going to add that over the top of there. Let's just take that off. There we go. And I'm going to pop that piece over there. So, chopping things into pieces is a good way of just making your pre-bought additions that are relatively expensive just go that little bit further. Now, I do want a bit of ink for these. So in the paper cuts, there are some extra bits. So let me just grab my thing, and I have a Distress Archival ink because this is permanent. And I want that to sit on there. And this will warp as it's drying, and I will ultimately end up needing to straighten it up, but that's fine. Actually, I think I'm going to pop it down there because it's going to be less warpy if I pop it underneath. And it's going to... Sorry, I've just hit my... I think I might just... Have I got more of that? Of course I've got more of that. Just bear with, ladies. There we are. Must have known I was going to need a new tube. There we are. So let's just layer that into there. Discover. I often layer things up and under. And then let's just pop that, I think, can go onto there. So let's just add that ink to. And the reason I had planned originally on popping it onto the top of the pieces, but actually it's going to warp, and these are paper. So by popping them out of the way, Mr. Bug, there we are, underneath there, we're anchoring them into place. And then we will resort to probably my most used product in this world. Let's glue that with that, which is my all-purpose glue heavy body gel. So let's just add some of that onto there. Make sure that I have the number 1 facing in the right direction. because that would not be helpful otherwise. And I'm going to pop that. So there we are, that way up, because then the weighing scales are around the right way. There we are. So that can go there. I do recycle, I refill them, but yes, I will recycle those. That's why I've not popped it in the bin. And I think it just needs a little bit of brown splatter. I know, but it just needs a bit of splatter. So let me just take some brown Lasur and a wet brush and break all the rules. So that is literally some brown paint on a splatter brush. Oh, get rid of that. There we are. And that will link all of my layers neatly together. Okay. So we have my first piece with Venice City of Arts. It celebrates the clock mould and the zodiac mould and the clock's rice paper. I will, with the remainder of this rice paper, possibly do 1 or 2 art journal pages. So you can, and I'll post those when I have time to make them. So we have a 6 by 12 inch panel featuring minimal molds for me, the wall decor products with the plasters, the wall decor paints and the wall lasers, and lost spackle for a little bit of added dimension. So I hope, ladies, that you have a good week, and I will see you live for Pentart next Tuesday. So bye-bye for now.